Did you know that Jesus is not the first Messiah? Long before the time of Christ, there existed another figure who faced a tragic end, and his story has been largely overlooked in mainstream religious narratives. Ancient Jewish texts propose a prophecy of two distinct messiahs. The first would die in battle, paving the way for the second, who would bring about final redemption. However, the biblical accounts do not depict Jesus as a warrior who died in battle. This raises an intriguing question. If these ancient texts are not referring to Jesus of Nazareth, then who is this first Messiah and what became of him? Join us as we delve into this captivating topic in the latest episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. For centuries, many individuals have held the belief that the Jewish tradition recognizes only one Messiah, yet this is a misconception. Buried in the depths of Talmudic, Kabbalistic, and apocalyptic literature is the concept of not one, but two Messiahs, Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph. Messiah ben David is widely recognized as the kingly redeemer hailing from the lineage of King David. In contrast, Messiah ben Joseph remains enigmatic, a figure obscured by theological interpretations and the passage of time, often referred to as the suffering servant. His narrative has been concealed for ages, and the implications of his true significance may be startling. According to ancient prophecies, Messiah ben Joseph was intended to emerge first, lead a battle against evil forces, and ultimately die in that conflict. His death was not to be seen as a failure, but celebrated as a profound sacrifice, one that would atone for the people's sins and create the conditions necessary for the triumph of the second Messiah, and David. Yet if these teachings were evident in ancient times, why have we not heard of him? The implication is that if Messiah ben Joseph had indeed lived and died before Jesus, his story may have been meticulously buried to safeguard the simplicity of a singular messianic identity. Or perhaps his death posed a threat to the political and religious status quo. But why would anyone seek to suppress such a remarkable narrative? The concept of a dying Messiah fundamentally disrupts the very tenets upon which many faiths have been established. If ben Joseph had truly existed and had perished prior to Jesus, it would pose serious challenges to the foundations of both traditional Judaism and mainstream Christianity. This scenario suggests that messianic redemption did not begin with the accounts in the Gospels. It actually started much earlier with a forgotten figure whose sacrifice prepared the way for subsequent events. Thus, the question arises: was ben Joseph erased from history to maintain the integrity of a simpler messianic theology, or were the dynamics of his death too volatile to be acknowledged? Before we explore the extensive narrative of ben Joseph, it is essential to understand the roots of this dual messianic expectation in ancient Judaism in the context of modern Jewish thought. The Messiah is often envisioned as a powerful king and heir of David, destined to restore Israel's former glory. However, ancient texts indicate that this perspective represents only a fragment of a larger picture. The Talmud, the Zohar, and the teachings of early rabbis articulate the belief in two messianic figures: Messiah ben David, the conquering ruler, and Messiah ben Joseph, a warrior destined to engage in a heroic conflict and perish before the arrival of the final redemption. This dual Messiah framework is not merely a theological innovation. Respected scholars such as Sardia and Nachmanides have recognized this two Messiah doctrine as a long-standing tradition. Messiah ben Joseph's demise is not a mere coincidence. It is an essential part of what is regarded as a mystical sacrifice that paves the way for Messiah ben David's ascension. Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, this intricate understanding appears to have been lost, or so it seems. Fortunately, remnants of this historical narrative have survived in ancient texts, preventing it from being completely obscured by later theological developments. While many contemporary readers may be unaware of Messiah ben Joseph, various writings within the Jewish tradition continue to echo his significance. In Talmudic commentaries, he is mourned as a fallen hero. Texts in the Midrash highlight his participation in the final battle, one he does not survive. Meanwhile, the Zohar presents him as a mystical figure bridging the gap between darkness and redemption. Although these sources each convey distinct aspects of ben Joseph's mission, there is a consistent theme. Messiah ben Joseph is to appear prior to ben David, suffer, and die in battle against the forces of Gog and Magog. Without his sacrifice, the path to redemption remains blocked. Now, let us delve into the narrative of this suffering servant. Unlike Messiah ben David, who is associated with peace and triumph, the role of Messiah ben Joseph is one marked by violence and tragedy. His mission does not commence with a grand coronation, but rather is rooted in warfare. He is preordained to lead Israel into a climactic battle against apocalyptic adversaries, like Gog and Magog. However, the narrative takes a grim turn. According to Talmudic sources, specifically Sukkah 5:2a, ben Joseph is destined to fall in combat. Nevertheless, this death is not conceptualized as a failure. Instead, it is understood as a sacred sacrifice. Certain texts suggest that his demise serves as atonement for Israel's sins, while others view it as a vital piece of a grand cosmic strategy that clears the way for Ben David's arrival. This is not the type of Messiah people were anticipating, as his story is drenched in blood rather than glory. Yet within Jewish mysticism, suffering does not equate to defeat. Instead, it signifies the commencement of redemption. Following Ben Joseph's death, his sacrifice does not go unnoticed. Zechariah 12:10 is frequently cited by rabbinic sources, describing a nation mourning a figure they have pierced. Ancient rabbis have interpreted this verse as a prophecy concerning Messiah ben Joseph. His death does not merely invoke public mourning, it triggers heavenly consequences. According to mystical traditions, the sacrifice of Ben Joseph reverberates through the divine realms, cleansing collective guilt and shaking the foundations of evil. The Zohar elaborates that his mission involves absorbing divine judgment, thus clearing the spiritual path for Ben David to usher in an age of peace. Without the first Messiah, the final redemption cannot unfold. But how did the concept of Messiah ben Joseph emerge? This notion did not appear out of nowhere. Instead, it evolved amidst the complex landscape of ancient Judaism. During the Second Temple period, Jewish literature was rich with apocalyptic anticipation, tensions among different priestly factions, and the collective trauma of a nation, among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Various texts reference to messianic figures, one associated with the priesthood and the other with royal lineage. Scholarly analyses of these texts have revealed mentions of a Messiah of Aaron and a Messiah of Israel, both awaited at the end of days. While these ancient writings do not explicitly name Ben Joseph, they create a fertile ground for the expectation of a suffering Messiah whose purpose aligns with the prophecies attributed to him. The connection between Ben Joseph and the expectation of suffering extends even further. Many biblical scholars propose that the servant songs found in Isaiah, particularly Isaiah 53, contain the earliest glimpses of this suffering messianic figure. He is described as despised and rejected, pierced for our transgressions. While later interpretations of this scripture shifted towards viewing it as a reference to an entire nation, earlier readings considered it as speaking to an individual Messiah. Additionally, Zechariah 12 and Daniel 9 reference a figure who is cut off before achieving victory, suggesting a Messiah with a tragic narrative. Interestingly, the Book of Enoch, often associated with Second Temple, mysticism also portrays a pre-Redeemer character steeped in sorrow and sacrifice. When we weave together these disparate threads, they depict a consistent theme within Jewish apocalyptic thought. There was an expectation for a Messiah who would first suffer and die before redemption could materialize. Yet as time progressed, theological focus shifted toward kingship and glory. Its transition obscured and minimized the intricate understanding of the suffering servant, resulting in a narrative heavily hinged on the Messiah's triumph rather than his sacrificial role in the broader tapestry of redemption. At this stage, it's clear. Messiah ben Joseph was prophesied to endure suffering and prepare the path for the second Messiah. But which specific battle was he destined to fight and die in to fulfill his mission? This leads us to the context of the battle against Gog and Magog. In Jewish eschatology, the end of the world unfolds not quietly but rather through tumultuous warfare. This apocalyptic conflict is known as the battle against Gog and Magog. It is within this chaos that Messiah ben Joseph's destiny is articulated. According to sources such as Talmud Sukkah 52a, Ben Joseph emerges as the leader of Israel's armies in this monumental confrontation. His task is clear: to vanquish chaos before it envelops the world in despair. However, the narrative carries a tragic twist. He is prophesied to perish during this battle. The ancient texts dictate that his defeat is a predetermined part of the story. He is struck down as nations rage and kingdoms crumble. His sacrifice sets the stage for the emergence of Ben David, whose role is not that of a warrior, but of a redeemer. Thus, the journey toward redemption begins with the fall of Ben Joseph on that fateful battlefield. But why was the death of Ben Joseph deemed necessary? Historians provide insight, drawing parallels to the concept of the scapegoat from Yom Kippur's rituals. Much like the scapegoat or the sacrificial offerings in the temple, Ben Joseph's demise serves as a form of atonement, absorbing the collective guilt of the people. His suffering is viewed as a spiritual purging, clearing the obstacles in preparation for the dawn of a true age of peace. According to the Zohar, this death may have been averted had the people been spiritually prepared, but the prophecies remain unyielding. Messiah Ben Joseph was destined to fall. His narrative resonates with parallels from Isaiah's suffering servant, where his demise provokes public mourning and correlates with Zechariah 12:10's prophecy of the one that is pierced. So, what occurs following the death of Ben Joseph? A cascade of significant events. With the warrior's fall, the path is finally clear for the arrival of the king. In light of the poignant story surrounding Ben Joseph, questions arise. Was he a historical figure? Some rabbis perceive him as entirely prophetic, suggesting he is an end-time figure yet to appear. However, a more popular belief posits that he lived, fought, and ultimately died long before the emergence of Jesus. This scenario brings forth a provocative line of thought. Could Ben Joseph have been a real individual, perhaps mistaken for a failed rebel or martyr, while simultaneously fulfilling his sacred role? Notably, the Talmud does not specify when this Messiah would appear. It only emphasizes that he must die. As a result, Ben Joseph's identity has become a conundrum, a mystery obscured by tradition that seems to both invite examination and elude definitive recognition. Yet if we heed the records upheld by numerous ancient texts, the case for Ben Joseph's existence becomes compelling. If he indeed existed, it must be noted that his narrative was not meant to bask in the limelight. Rather, it was destined for silence and subjugation. From the outset, his journey was marked by suffering, not by the glory usually associated with messianic figures. When rabbinic writings reference Ben Joseph, they imply that his full identity will only be comprehended posthumously when redemption unfolds and the time for acknowledgement has already passed. Might this lingering obscurity be why discourse surrounding his identity is resurging in contemporary times? Are we finally beginning to piece together who he might have been? This is why Ben Joseph is often termed the Shadow Messiah, a figure whose effects are palpably felt, yet he remains largely unseen. He is a Messiah who preps the world for salvation, but fades from memory by the time that salvation arrives. This raises further questions around the historical landscape. Could an ancient individual, lost to the annals of time, have embodied this role? Perhaps he was an unjustly executed priest, or a freedom fighter whose sacrifice inspired a nation, a scapegoat whose death rewrote the course of history. Should such a person have existed, he may have perished believing he had failed. Conversely, in the grand narrative of divine redemption, his perceived failure could have been the divine plan all along. As we search for those who may have fulfilled the prophetic roles attributed to Ben Joseph, several candidates emerge. Among the most notable is Simon Bar Kokhba, the revolutionary leader who led an uprising against the Romans in the 2nd century CE. In those tumultuous times, Rabbi Akiva, one of the most revered sages of his day, declared Bar Kokhba to be the Messiah. He united the people, recaptured Jerusalem, and even minted coins bearing his image. For a fleeting moment, it appeared as though Israel's long-awaited redemption was within reach. Yet tragedy soon followed in the form of Rome's brutal retaliation. The rebellion incited by Rabbi Akiva was devastatingly crushed, leading to Bar Kokhba's death along with the collapse of the movement. While some followers asserted this failure disqualified him as the Messiah, others well-versed in the prophecies of Ben Joseph argued that his fall was indeed the essence of the prophecy. He was destined to be the warrior Messiah who would rise, fight, and ultimately perish before the final redemption could be realized. Hence, one must contemplate the question, could Bar Kokhba have been Messiah Ben Joseph? However, it is essential to recognize that Bar Kokhba is not the only historical figure suggested by scholars. Some point to Ananias III, the high priest whose horrifying assassination during the 2nd century BCE sent shockwaves through the temple system. Others have sought traces of Ben Joseph in figures like Joshua ben Nun, the biblical leader who led Israel into the promised land without assuming a throne for himself. While Joshua exhibits compelling similarities to Ben-Joseph, his lineage does not trace back to David, creating a notable distinction. Peering deeper, we uncover numerous unnamed martyrs, zealots, prophets, and reformers who sacrificed their lives for Israel, individuals who never claimed messianic titles. Their narratives echo fragments of the Ben-Joseph archetype, suggesting that perhaps we have been approaching the inquiry from an incorrect angle. Instead of focusing solely on identifying who Ben-Joseph was, we might be better served by recognizing the recurring patterns. A figure who dies prematurely suffers in silence and clears a path for another to fulfill the ultimate mission of Messiah. His death is a prerequisite for the rise of the next. Still, despite the gradual emergence of interest in Ben-Joseph's story, it remains undeniably true that his narrative has faced suppression throughout history. In the aftermath of the crushing defeat suffered by the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jewish leadership encountered a profound crisis, merely a political crisis, but one rooted in prophecy. Consider the ramifications from their perspective. Their hopes pinned on Bar Kokhba had crumbled, resulting in the loss of countless lives. The devastation of Jerusalem and the alarming recognition that Roman authorities now regarded Jewish messianic beliefs as a formidable threat to the established imperial order. In the face of such adversity, what action could a prudent leader take?